Hello and welcome to Conversations on Prophetic Ministry. I'm Mark Iles. I'm with my friend Mark Gamblin, and we have another video on prophetic ministry for you to consider. And our subject today is why we need the apostolic ministry. Interesting that we're doing prophetic videos, and our title is on the apostolic ministry. But we feel it's really key to the emergence of the prophetic as well. So I'll hand over to Mark, who's going to kick us off.
Yeah. Well, I think church is built on the foundations of apostles and prophets.
Yep.
The apostolic and prophetic are close to one another.
Yeah.
So I think we talk about the fivefold ministry.
Yeah.
So you've got it's the evangelist, the prophet, pastor, the teacher,
and the apostle.
The apostle.
Yeah.
And we all know what the pastor is. We know what the teacher is. We know what the evangelist is. We sort of know what the prophet is. But what about the apostolic?
Yeah.
And I think in order for the church to, especially in the UK, I'm talking about, in order for the church to be in maturity and for the church to grow into maturity, it needs to be apostolic.
Yeah.
It needs all those fivefold areas together. And we're still almost like waiting for the apostolic to come through.
We are. I think we are.
And I think we took another video about birthing, prophetic births.
Yeah.
Well, are we in labour for the apostolic?
Right.
Do we still need to give birth to the apostolic?
Yeah.
So
we sort of know what it is. We've seen the scan of the baby, but we don't actually know the detail till it really emerges, which is one of the problems that people don't. There isn't general agreement on what the apostolic ministry is.
Yeah. I mean, some people say, well, an apostle is a bishop, or some people say, well, an apostle is someone that oversees a network of churches. Others, an apostle is someone that plants churches.
Yeah.
Well, how do you define what an apostle is? What does an apostle do?
Yeah.
And I think that's key. What's that apostolic anointing? How do we flow that apostolic anointing? And so I think that's particular. No, we said this isn't about. This is a prophetic conversation.
Yeah,
we talk about apostles, but it's a prophetic conversation.
I like that
because the prophetic needs the apostolic.
Yeah.
The prophetic and the apostolic partner together because church is built on that foundation.
That's correct.
And so, in order to get the church into maturity, we need to call forth and work and partner alongside the apostolic. The apostolic is going to ground it.
Yes.
It's like, I mean, the prophetic's all up there. We could be all very up there. It could be, well, I see into heaven, and I'm seeing this into heaven, and I'm seeing all this kind of stuff. I'm seeing all these words and colours and objects coming down out of heaven, and brilliant. The apostolic earths that.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it's all
applies it and activates it.
Yeah. It's like, I'm very abstract. It can be. The prophetic, the apostolic is going to come along and it's going to earth that,
right? And
it's going to make sense of it, and that's where you then need. Okay, so I'm talking a lot short a minute. It's like, okay, look, this is how a fivefold, in my mind, operate and work.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The prophetic.
Because we know we need the fivefold. That's the common ground. Everybody knows, particularly in charismatic circles, that we need the fivefold ministry. That's what Christ has given them to us as gifts.
And these aren't just people operating that fivefold ministry. These aren't people that just flow as an evangelist, but they are an evangelist. Or people that flow in prophecy or do this as a prophet. So it's people that hold those, I guess, offices. Okay, but I do think though that church leadership structures need to be made up of those five. I think in the church leadership structure you need the apostle, you need the prophet, you need the evangelist, and you need the teacher. You've got that fivefold. But in my mind, the apostolic works like this, or the fivefold works like this. The prophetic breaks something open.
Okay.
So the prophetic pioneers out front, and it breaks something. It's a shift. Okay. Now, the prophetic then wants to move on. So that's I break out. We've created a breakthrough, created a shift. Brilliant. I'm on to the next target.
You've had your cake and you're moving on for more.
Okay, well, I've done it.
Okay.
Let's go over and get breakthrough over there and whatever. So the prophetic's broken through. The apostolic makes sense of what's broken through and earths what's broken through. The teacher teaches about the breakthrough. Teaches about it. The pastor pastors the breakthrough, pastors the church into the breakthrough.
Works through the issues with individual people.
And then the evangelist evangelizes people into that breakthrough and really reaches the lost into that thing. It all works together as a team in a harmonious being, you know.
I love the way you're talking about something that people rarely have seen.
Okay, but that's
the goal.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And you can't have. That's why we've got a church that's very teacher orientated. You're lopheavy. You're lopsided.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the breakthroughs.
Yeah.
You're not going to how to earth things. You're very lopsided in that. Or if you're a very evangelistic church, well, you're not going to get the spiritual breakthroughs. So it all works together.
So what happens if you've got a church that isn't big enough to have all the fivefold ministry operating? I guess, I can see in large churches, and sometimes in my older charismatic days, we would call them resource churches, because they had ministries that were sufficiently big enough that they could then travel to other churches. But what about, say, a church of 100 people that doesn't have necessarily the fivefold?
No. I mean, church. I believe that every Christian will fall somewhere along that spectrum. Spectrum.
Okay, right, yeah.
So if there's, say you've got a spectrum.
We're all in the fivefold somewhere.
I think we're all there somewhere.
Okay, right.
I think we're born again, because they're part of the officers of Christ.
Yeah.
So I think some people will tend to lean more towards being a teacher.
Right.
But it doesn't mean they have an anointing or an office of a teacher or anything like that, but they're dispositioned to move closer to teaching or teaching. They get switched on by Bible teaching.
Right.
They get switched on by theology. They want a good teach. They get stimulated by that.
Okay. Yeah.
Then there are others in the church which will be more evangelistic.
Right.
They don't have to be an evangelist, but they are more prone. Yeah. If someone said, let's go out and evangelize, they'd be, yes, I'm up for that. I like that. I'm more switched on by that. Yeah. I think some people will be more switched on by prophetic, some people will be more switched on by pastoral. So I think we're all somewhere on that spectrum.
Okay.
So I think in church of 100, you're going to have 100, you're going to have people in that church who will be somewhere on that spectrum.
Yeah. Okay. That still leaves me, we're looking for people who've actually got a ministry in this area, but it means they do have the resource they actually need.
Yeah, but the pastor out people. Yeah.
That's so our fundamental answer to the why do we need the apostolic ministry is because we want and believe the fivefold ministry needs to operate in the church, and we are lacking clarification and the emergence of the prophetic, the apostolic at the moment to actually make that work. You've got areas where people aren't in agreement about what the apostolic is. We've got people who you and I would recognize apostolic who don't call themselves apostles, and you've got other people who would call themselves apostles that we wouldn't necessarily recognize as apostles. But speaking for the prophetic, as Mark said, the church is built on the foundations of the apostles and the prophets. So that is just such a significant part, and it'll take us into a dimension of the prophetic which many people, most of us haven't experienced before, where we're working alongside and with an apostolic ministry. I was very fortunate enough in my early years when I wasn't moving in the prophetic at a ministry level to be able to travel with the apostle in our church who had founded the church, moved in the supernatural, and a network built up around him inevitably because of his wisdom, and being able to travel with him, it created a very different environment because of the particularly strategic way that he would see things. So he'd be in a church and I'd know he'd recognize immediately there was a disciplinary issue, or they were lacking in vision, or there wasn't unity among the leadership, or the congregation had gone to sleep. He would recognize these things, it seemed to me, instantly. And I think one of the things that I found interesting was the apostolic ministry seemed to be only able to function if it had a prophetic edge, if it had a teaching edge, if it had a pastoring edge. So he seemed to be able, not significantly, but he was able to move in most of those areas at the same time. Yes. And it drove me nuts because frequently in a meeting, I would start the meeting off and be prophesying over people in the meeting as was required. And about, 10 minutes in, he would take over from me, and his words were just so much more significant and penetrating because of his experience on that side. So it was a very helpful environment, although I've not been able to stay there, but to have the experience of that. So we do need the apostolic ministry. Actually, we're arguing that for the prophetic to emerge into its fullness, we need apostles around
for the church to emerge into it. Yeah, we need that. We need, I think there's space for it.
So going back to a video we did a little while ago on the drawback of traditional church, we need the fivefold ministry alive and kicking in the new church to take us forward against the challenges that we're facing in our country and in the world today.
Yes,
on that sort of side.
Exactly. And no, I think churches can't be built just upon the teacher.
No.
Or it can't be built just upon that.
Well, we're trying. We do try.
Yeah. I mean,
we do try.
Obviously, you need Bible teaching. Obviously, that's.
There are a number of denominations where the leaders of the church believe they're the apostle. That's why they're leading the church. That's how there are a number of denominations where they see the leader of the church as the apostle. So, that is the final authority type of thing.
Yeah. So in 10 minutes.
It is. Why we need the apostle? Well, we need it for the fivefold ministry. We need it for the development of the apostolic. I think one of the things that people don't recognise in apostles, and perhaps we model everything around the Apostle Paul, is they do bring the strategic into the church.
Yes.
And I think that is something that's significantly lacking. You're going back to it's not about managing a meeting program. It's about strategically developing the church and growing the church. So I think an apostle, for instance, is somebody who would recognise that a house group or a life group is just a warm nest, and it needs to be able to multiply. And if it can't, it needs surgery to help it along that journey.
Yes, exactly. I think the apostolic,
or planting new locations.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more strategic.
Yeah,
they're going to be a lot more. Strategic. They see things strategically.
That's right. Yeah. So they're taking our prophetic words and they're applying them into a situation. And as you say, they're actually grounding it on that. And I think one of the things the apostles do, particularly because they are church planters, and I think that's one of the strengths of the denomination I'm in, that they are very powerfully, forcefully directed at church planting, is they're looking at ways of growing the kingdom. They're not looking at ways of maintaining the meeting.
No.
But how, if we're saying that we need apostles, how do we help them emerge, or do we just wait for it to happen? You mentioned that we are sort of in a birthing place. I mean, we know what we want, but we haven't got it. So where do we go from here?
Well, we make space.
We make space. Okay.
We make space. We allow the baby to be born.
Yeah.
We allow them to come forth.
Okay. So does that mean you and I need to connect with more apostolic figures?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We need to identify the apostolic and connect with it, because it almost seems like there's a disconnect at the moment. The apostolic.
Yeah.
And well, the apostles are there, but it's like, well, we need to connect.
Yeah.
Prophetic, I think, needs to connect in the apostolic.
Yeah.
There can't be this disconnect, and I think we need to be proactive in working with them and identifying them and bringing the apostolic into prophetic circles, bring the apostolic into prophetic groups.
The challenge I'm finding at the moment is I do, while it may be just generic, if you talk to prophetic people, they do recognise the need for apostles in their lives. I don't know if apostles recognise the need for prophets or prophetesses. Hey, ladies, when we say prophets, we also mean prophetesses. The need for prophets in their lives. Yeah. They are instinctively building the fivefold ministry around them.
Yes.
Not just prophets on that side. So.
But that's why we all have a place in the fivefold.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the fivefold, I mean, they tend to be offices.
Yeah.
So, and as an office, they tend to be strategic thinking.
Yeah. They do.
So evangelism,
all of them,
evangelists will be strategic in evangelists,
because they're equipping the saints to the works of service.
Yeah. So this isn't just I've got a gift of prophecy. This is like you're operating in the role of a prophet to be strategic.
Yeah. I know a number of people that I would recognise as apostles, but I know quite a number of young men and women who aren't in an apostolic ministry yet, but I would recognise they've got an apostolic calling potentially on their life, which is a challenging one. I mean, the prophetic one's pretty challenging. So I do see people coming on who aren't necessarily in that position yet, but God is bringing through the system on that side.
But whether it needs intercession to help birth, apostolic, whether it needs to be increased intercession.
Well, we're then saying that we can't go where we want to go without an apostolic ministry. The church needs it more than it's needed it before.
The body of Christ needs it to be mature.
Yeah.
We can't have the maturity of the body of Christ without the fivefold flowing together, working together. And that specifically means the apostolic.
Yeah. And I think fitting in with some of the other videos we're doing, we're seeing the church entering into a very new season where there will be the death of old wineskins and stuff. And really, we need the apostles around us, because just leading church meetings isn't going to take us into that new zone or new season that we feel we're entering into. So in many ways, we can't go on without them, is why one of the reasons why we need them. We can say we need it for maturity, and I hear what you're saying, but actually there is an urgency about it now, isn't there?
Yeah.
There is an urgency about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for watching here. We trust that has got you thinking and looking for apostles in your own lives. If you're enjoying these videos on Conversations on Prophetic Ministry, please subscribe, and we hope to catch up with you next time. Thank you. Bye.